Blink. Well, you'll have to excuse me. I just got out of the shower. Blah 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 blah. Takes of the week. How's it going? Good. Uh, all right. Let's. This is a pretty heavy week. Actually, this is also true. The last time I worked at a comic shop is every week all the stuff comes in and my boss will either go, "Oh, it's a big week," or "Oh, not that big a week," or it's kind of in the middle. When you're me, every week is a big week. I mean, there are times where I'll get like a smaller stack than usual, but this week was it was big, and there's a lot of good stuff and a lot of newish stuff. So let's talk about it, shall we? First of all, it's 78 MPH here. This is by the Red 5 publisher. This actually came out a few weeks ago, but my boss admittedly orders kind of low from Red 5 in general, which is a drag. But aside from Atomic Robo, which they haven't done in, I want to say 5 years now, maybe 4, most of their output's been, from what I've read anyway. I can't speak to, obviously, what I haven't read. I do not recognize any of the names on the creative team, but the premise of this is in the far-flung future, or the not too distant future. Something where Earth is too close to the sun, so it's just constant. That's what it is. There's no more ozone layer, so the sun is extremely deadly. And so the only way humanity can survive is in this massive, like, motorcade, and they have to travel at 78 miles per hour constantly to stay ahead of the sun. It's like Speed, except environmentally existential. Oh, that was pretty good. Just riffed that. So, yeah, that was enough of a premise, because I'm always going to like the post-apocalypse, seeing as how I live there and all. And, but it also, as a subgenre, can be, it's been done. But this is a new wrinkle. It's not far removed from like the Road Warrior in those movies. Well, Road Warrior. But it's got a bit of a twist on it. There's a fine line between clever and stupid. Also this week, named after great Coaster song, Poison Ivy #1. You're gonna need a notion of calamine lotion. Or if you don't like the Coasters, then whatever Limey band did in the 80s. I can't remember whatever mod band that was. This is a new ongoing series. I think it's an ongoing series. It's just in time for Pride Month. Because if you're unaware, Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn have been a thing for some time now. Although I do believe not too long ago they were split up. And I only remember that because the writer of that book, really took a beating on Twitter after the fact from the legions of rabid ship fans of Harley and Ivy. You can Google what ship means if you don't. I frankly wish I didn't even know. It's not that bad. It's just stupid as fuck. Another news, I'm out of marijuana. So yeah, I mean, I if I'm not trying to be flip about Pride Month, and especially in comics, it's obviously something that needs to happen. It just doesn't affect me personally. I mean, they also DC put out an anthology called just DC Pride, I believe, all featuring all non-binary, non-cis-het characters and creators, I would imagine. Marvel, not to brag, but Marvel's been doing one of those every 3 months for the past 3 years. The bad news is they're all not very good. Marvel does do a lot of those. Marvel is, again, ahead of the pack on DC. Marvel routinely puts out these days anthologies featuring all queer characters and creators, all African American or Black characters and creators, Asian, so on and so forth. and it's great. I'm all for it. It is a bit of a fart in a stiff wind. It's not, and I'm not saying that to be at all critical. The thing is that sort of underrepresentation has been rampant in everything, but in comics, in this context. So Marvel and DC are trying to level the playing field. And I can hear my old boss going, well, they're just doing it for the money. And my answer would be, yeah. Show me a better motivator to treat people like actual people. Marvel and Disney and big corporations are finally, seem to me anyway, getting hip to the fact that they can make more money if their bread is buttered on the homo side. And by excluding a large portion of the population, that's less money for them. I mean, I don't like it any more than you do, but I also don't like people at all. And this is one of the many, 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 many reasons why. Because they need to be motivated to treat those who are maybe different from the mainstream in the only way they know how. The finger thing means the taxes. Downside to this is that with these anthologies, especially with Marvel, since they're cranking them out at such a high rate, they are trying to break in new creators as well, who may just not be as well tested, not quite as good. I think I might have mentioned this too. I also am a big science fiction guy. I hope you were sitting down for that revelation. And I have a monthly subscription, or it's every 2 months, a subscription to the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. It's my favorite sci-fi outlet since I'm a kid. And I don't remember if I did mention, so I do apologize. But there was an issue, I want to say about a year ago, because I'm kind of behind, where the letter from the editor, traditionally at the beginning of the issue, talks a lot about wanting more representation for non-cis-het, my rights here, for non-cis-het people. And I was like, yeah, sure, absolutely. I've seen enough of me. I don't need, you know what I mean? I find myself just far more interested in different characters. I was just, again, birdwalk on this birdwalk. I just was walking back from the CVS down the street, and they had all these posters for the new Ms. Marvel program, which I'll probably get to eventually. But it did occur, like, it made me think about how much I know, and that actually ties back into Poison Ivy. Ms. Marvel currently is a 16-year-old Pakistani-American girl who is raised in a traditional Muslim household. So couldn't be further from my experience as a teenager and as a grown man. But all the more reason for me to find it interesting. And Kamala Khan is such an interesting character to me because I do see a lot. We have a lot in common. Despite all that stuff, she's a big superhero nerd. That's like one of the most appealing things about that character now is she's a fanboy, basically. She's like so wide-eyed, and I relate to that too. I mean, the first time I met Pete Holmes, you know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. Dave Attell said, nice set to me once, and I almost fainted. So it's like a very similar thing. And that's how you level the playing field. You show dorks like me how similar I am to these other people. And once I'm done being insulted, being compared to people, I'll be like, oh yeah. Ms. Marvel was created and written by G. Willow Wilson, who also is writing Poison Ivy. I brought it around. I have not read anything that G. Willow Wilson has written. I want to say she's done a 3 like prose novels with DC characters, if I'm not mistaken. And I really, really, really enjoyed her run on Ms. Marvel, though. And once she left the book, I didn't immediately drop it when she left. But when she left, I was like, I don't know if this is going to... It's just a tough act to follow. But now she's back, and she's with a character who I'm, pretty familiar with, so I'm certain it's going to be good. Also, I don't know the artist, but I did... my boss at the shop made me... he showed, look how great this art is, and he wasn't wrong. I don't usually like to look through the book before I read it. Did I get all that? Oh, I think what the point I left hanging is that Oh, right, the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. So they made a very clear call to action, if to themselves, if no one else, that we're going to start publishing more uh, less established writers, but ones that represent more people in America. And I regret to inform you that that experiment failed. Sometimes it's simply a matter of, and this I'm speaking now as a professional editor. Sometimes people just aren't good at writing yet. I mean, some of those stories, some of them are flat out terrible. Some of them were fine, but like this happens a lot. I'll read a piece of fiction by somebody and I'll go, boy, their next thing is going to be great. I know. And then so I find that that's a similar. With the Marvel anthologies, the Pride ones and the Asian American ones and those I bought because I'm a junkie. But in most anthologies, even in comics especially, are very hit or miss. So I stopped buying them because they're oversized, so they're priced higher, and I was like, I can read these on the app. But I mean, Poison Ivy by G. Willow Wilson, you got no complaints. Also this week, I got Justice Warriors #1. This is from the good people at Ahoy Comics, who I've read a good chunk of, but not much lately. I want to say I just read something kind of recently. What the hell? Oh, Blacksmith, that I was talking about a couple weeks ago. Great stuff. Good stuff. Fun stuff. So, I don't know anybody. I don't recognize any of the names on this creative team, but from what I saw and just from looking at the cover, it looks like very much a throwback to 80s and 90s action comics. Not the Superman, but, you get it. The genre, not the title. What's really weird to me about it's okay. You don't have to be a genius to realize that the sort of wave of 80s and 90s nostalgia comes because people my age are reaching their middle age and are therefore more prone to spend money on things that make them feel like a teenager. Even I'm not immune to it, and it's really kind of a bummer. Teenage me would be pissed. Here's the thing. When I was in the 90s, when I was in high school, the early 90s, I feel like I should make clear. Sidebar, it feels like the late 90s and the early 90s are two different decades. And I feel like when people say, only 90s kids remember this, they talk about Yamagaki or something. I was like, I was an adult when that happened. So that's not the 90s to me. Yo MTV Raps is the 90s. Basically, the 90s to me started in 1986. End sidebar. In the early 90s when I was in high school, 70s nostalgia was huge. And it was the same goddamn thing. People who had been in high school in the 70s were getting older. They had more disposable income. So businesses, especially in entertainment, etc., were aiming their sights or putting their sights on this demo. And so that way everybody, then all of a sudden I'm going to school with idiots who are wearing bell bottoms. I mean, they were idiots before they put bell bottoms on. Now, the hot hippie girls aside, it's a disgusting look. 70s fashion. I mean, I think I've cooled on, or I'm not as angry about it, but I remember being a very no fun 14-year-old and just being like, with all this nostalgia bullshit, what are we going to be nostalgic for when we're adults? Well, here you have it. So I guess I didn't, what do you know, a 14-year-old me didn't know what he was talking about. So as cynical as I made this sound, that it's, largely, I live in America, so it's hard for me to see it any other way. The culture it's a very Marxist way of thinking, not a Marxist system. God no. But yeah, follow the money. That's what's going to tell you the motivation behind almost anything, even in the arts, in America anyway. But even given all that, I really do find that it was this sort of comic in the 90s that made me stop reading comics for a while. And now that I'm older and somehow less uptight, but also more, I now look back on this, and like I've mentioned before, there's a lot of 90s stuff, like actually from the 90s that I've gone back and read and still recognize as being garbage, but enjoy it more now for that. And again, it's another rant I'm sure I've gone on, but where I generally find bad movies more entertaining than good movies these days. I love good movies. Who doesn't love a good movie? But honestly, give me a shitty movie any day of the week. This is relevant. I'm, again, not sure if I brought this up. I went and saw, a couple months ago, I went and saw The Batman. And I was bored for the entire 3 fucking hours of that thing. Performances are all top notch. Sparkly vampire kid and foxy light skinned black lady and Irish guy disguised as Burgess Meredith. They were all great. But I couldn't have been just more bored. It was a super boring movie. Beautifully shot, directed, and acted, like I said, but just so I was angrily bored. I was forcing myself to stay awake. And it was lame. The very next week, I went and saw the Jared Leto film from 2022, Morbius, The Living Vampire. And boy, did that stink. So much more fun. Laugh out loud moments. I split that movie up into 3 categories. There were the actual legit, cool, like, oh, it was a really nice, there's a good shot or a fun thing or this or that. Legitimately good parts. Then there were the parts that were like kind of stinky, but also like, yeah, this is about right. And then the parts that were so bad that I laughed out loud in the theater. I was probably more stoned than anybody else in that theater, but I was definitely laughing harder than anybody. And I really wish I made myself remember a couple of the lines, at least on the walk home. I guess I'd have to watch again. But there was 2 lines that Jared Leto said that made me laugh out loud. But the main thing was he starts out Michael Morbius and he's on these weird crutches and he's got this degenerative blood disease. And then he discovers the cure for it, which is a serum made out of the blood of a vampire bat, which turns him into a living vampire. It also gave him washboard abs. It's so fucking funny. He walks out of the fly chamber that he had, Jeff Goldblum let him borrow it, and I'm cured, and then just ripped 8-pack. I was like, good God. I'm strictly for the ladies, but I'm like, I'll eat a charcuterie board off of that guy. Are you kidding me? But boy, it was a moment, and Leto is so, I have hunger. He was so earnest. Yeah, I laughed and laughed and laughed. That was a cry laugh, I think. I laughed so hard that I was crying. Because it was presented so serious. So matter, like, yeah, obviously. You're gonna have I mean, why not, right? You're gonna have what is that where I'm gonna draw the line? Like, oh, this serum is gonna cure him of his disease and make him into a living vampire. Oh yeah, I'd buy that. It's gonna give him washboard. Get the fuck out of here. This looks like fun. Okay, sorry. Bird walks here in the old picks of the week, but I'll try to make this. I mean, honestly, with this stuff, there's not a whole lot to add to it, but I will try. First up is Alien number 12. Great issue. Still, the cover is the best thing about it, but still a very fun issue. And I'll take the time to reiterate that if you haven't read any Alien comics, I would highly advise it, because if you like those movies even a little bit, as I only really kind of like the movies a little bit, you will like the comics a lot more, I find. Batman the Fortress, this was great. This was, I largely bought it for Derek Robertson's artwork, which never disappoints. He also drew that Flashpoint Zero from not too long ago, so it feels like he's working more these days. This is what I like to call an entry-level Batman story, which is really what I'm in the market for anymore. I've really gotten sick of Batman, and this happens a lot. It's kind of cyclical, where I love the character as any right-blooded American does, red-blooded American does, but I like the Punisher better. But it's good art. It's just nothing really like, oh, you got to see this. So the premise of this story, I don't give a shit about the Court of Owls or how many different Batman there are now, or how many, there's Gotham, a guy Gotham. I like that character, but I'm like, Grant Morrison did a thing called Batman Inc. I want to say about 12 years ago, and that took the idea of having like a team, like a Bat family, to the logical worldwide conclusion where there was a Batman and Robin in every major nation in the world. So the fact that they keep adding more to, like, there's Batgirl and there's Robin and there's 4 or 5 Robins and there's Red Hood and there's Red Robin and blah blah blah. It's enough. Because at this point, there comes a point where it's like, how many people work for Bruce Wayne in this town? This is something for your layman, somebody who doesn't read Batman comics very often. I read more of them than the average Joe, but I still don't read enough to want to wade through the continuity. So this it sets it up, knocks it down. The premise is that there's an alien invasion encroaching upon Earth. All the electronics, like a giant EMP, has wiped out all electronics around the globe. Also something Marvel used recently. I'm not saying. This is also written by Gary Whitta, who I know from. I looked him up and I was like, oh right, that's what I know from. I think he might be more of a screenwriter, which is why I know his name. I have to look it up again. My phone's out there. So it's up to Batman to figure it out. And at the same time, there has, of course, been a breakout at the Arkham Asylum. So he's around up the Penguin and the Joker, too. And it's like, how many times can you see the Batman fight the Joker? But when it's just like, hey, here's Batman fighting the Joker, you're like, okay, good. So yeah, that was good. This was really fun. The Closet, #1, written by James Tynion IV. Oh, he doesn't have the 4th on his name anymore here. This promises to be pretty fun. I'm looking forward to future issues. This issue is just kind of setting up the world, which is fine. But essentially the premise is, what if the monster in your closet wasn't bound to your closet? And this family, this poor child, they move to a new house, and he tries to get his parents to know there's a monster in his closet, and they don't take him seriously. And he's like, look, we're moving out anyway, you don't have to worry about it. He does have to worry about it. Also, just really quick, I also read these 2 Black Panther-centric books, and they're so much fun. First up, you got Black Panther #6. I can't recommend this book enough, and I really don't. I know I've said this before. Ta-Nehisi Coates is a tremendous writer, and I enjoyed most of his run on the Black Panther. But John Ridley's run is already high up there. It's like on the Mount Rushmore of runs already. 6 issues in. And again, I could be projecting, but I feel like Ridley is very purposefully being like, we're not doing socio-political commentary in the Black Panther monthly comic book anymore. We're doing guys hitting other guys. And it's great. Also, this is one of the best Alex Ross covers I've seen, because it's one of the most understated ones that I've ever seen. It's not so Alex Rossi. Not to be confused with Janice Rossi, 2R. Thank you. Yeah, good stuff. This one also is Avengers Forever, and if you'll recall, also 6 issues in, this takes place across the multiverse, which, again, another sidebar. Everybody's going gaga for this multiverse, what with the Doctor Strange movie and the Spider-Man Doctor Strange movie not too long ago. And sure, fine, but also, you're just now know what now people are just now like, oh, there's the multiverse. I will say that when they made a What If TV show, I was like, oh man, they've got enough material in the MCU now to do this. I mean, What If was a comic that didn't even start until the Marvel Age of Comics had been around for over a decade. Actually, about the same amount of time as the MCU has, so I guess that makes sense. But this is one where it's an alternate universe Black Panther where he's the Vibranium Man, much like Iron Man. And I saw that on the cover. I was like, oh man, Black Panther is Iron Man. But it's not just Black Panther is Iron Man. Black Panther is Spider-Man. It's so much fun. It's all very Black Panther centric. And I've always loved Black Panther, but again, thank you. I mean, there's the times where the MCU kind of horns in on the comics in a way that I don't much care for. But then there's ways where I really like where Black Panther has been kind of getting the short shrift for some time. I felt in the comics until that movie came out, and now, you know, I wore. I don't know if I told this story. I was wearing my Black Panther T-shirt the other day, and I stopped for a bagel on the way to work, and the nice lady asked me my name for the order. I said Jimmy. And as soon as I said that, I heard a guy go, "Hey, Jimmy." And I turned, and there was a black fellow there who I'd never seen before in my life, but he had clearly heard me say my own name. And when I looked over at him, he went like this. And I returned it. I was like, forever, dude. Wakanda forever. So, thanks, Black Panther, for letting me make friends with black guys. It's something I've always wanted to do. Well, I think that's enough skirting racism for one day. We'll see you back here next week.